Hello. Thank you guys so much for inviting me here in London. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me here today. You guys have no idea what an honor it is to be here with you all here in the UK, in the heart for the global movement for Palestine. Hundreds of thousands of people in this country have taken to the streets to show the world what true solidarity and support for Palestine looks like. We have looked to you, London, as a great example of unity and activism, standing up to your own British government that is not only complicit in Israel's genocide, but is leading it as well. London, Brussels, and Washington have for far too long preached to the world about the ideals of the so-called international rules-based order, weaponizing human rights and democracy to allow Israel to commit unthinkable crimes against humanity. And as a survivor myself of Israeli occupation and apartheid, I commend you all, the citizens of this country, for standing up to the British and Israeli imperialism machine and being a voice for all of the decapitated babies and slaughtered men and women in Gaza. But beyond protesting and showing up in the streets of London, organizing events and disrupting the speeches of figures who support apartheid, we have also looked to the direct actions of Palestine Action, which have disrupted Israel's war machine. Israel's largest arms factory, Elbit Systems, has lost millions of dollars worth of contracts because of the efforts of local organizers. And we all know too well how empires criminalize direct action to protect their profits. They want to call smashing windows and spray painting buildings terrorism, when the real terrorists are using cluster munitions, drones, missiles, and an AI lavender system to directly target pregnant women, newborn babies, and children in their sleep. They want to normalize fathers collecting the body parts of their children in plastic bags while talking to us about civility and barbarism. Don't let the intimidation of our political elite make us futile. Futility is dangerous. It's the belief that there is nothing one person can do against an enormous array of the world's injustices, political violence, and this genocide. Yet, many of the world's greatest movements have been ignited from the work of just one single person. One action creates a ripple effect that turns into a global wave of revolution. Let's look to the example of our brothers and sisters in Yemen, a country ravaged. This is an ancient civilization rich with minerals, culture, and history. This country has been ravaged by US and British imperialism and a US-Saudi starvation campaign that has left over 23 million people starving over the last decade. Yet, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Yemenis occupy their streets demanding the end of the genocide, declaring their unequivocal support. The United States, with the cooperation of the British and the UAE, have set up sexual torture sites in southern Yemen and waged their so-called war on terror there for decades. Drone wars led by the US, mostly under the Obama administration, have been seen to target weddings, killing entire families and extrajudicial killings. And yet, Yemen has risen as a hero of Palestine, for Palestine, and enforced a historic Red Sea blockade of Israeli, American, and British ships. This has cost these countries and their corporations and their shipping companies billions of dollars in losses. And this simple yet effective act, this heroic act of a blockade by Yemen, has forced the Israeli port of Eilat to file for bankruptcy. Major accomplishment. actions don't matter, or that boycotts don't work. Israel currently occupies the land of Socotra and has an intelligence gathering hub there based in cooperation with the United States and the United Arab Emirates. We have also reported at MintPress that Israeli ships carrying weapons and assassins have passed by Yemen to carry out assassinations in the region, including against Iran. Yemen has historically stood up for Palestine against the Israeli regime since its inception in 1948. Israel's founder and their first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, declared Yemen an enemy from the very beginning for defending Palestinian human rights. Now, David Ben-Gurion worked with the CIA to try to set up a spy and military bases to control the Red Sea access in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the Cameron Islands. Now, the Cameron Islands controls all access into the Red Sea, and even the UK once occupied the strait at the onset of World War I. So, the people of Yemen have come out by the millions to declare their unequivocal support for the people of Palestine once again. And they are willing to risk a war to end the humanitarian crisis there, to stop the human suffering. And instead of stopping Israel's genocide in Gaza, because they have the power to do so, what has the US and Britain done? They continue to pound Yemen every single week with bombs to protect an out-of-control apartheid state. If we have learned anything from the US and the British-backed genocide in Gaza, it's that the international rules-based order has been exposed for its moral hypocrisy. This is the true face of US and British military machine. In America, we are told to choose between Democrats and Republicans, as if there's much of a difference. It's like asking us to choose which killing machine would we prefer, Lockheed Martin or Raytheon. The Democratic Party, which has been led by President Joe Biden, has led this genocide in Gaza while pretending to care about ending the human suffering and drawing invisible fake lines. Kamala Harris has just been coronated as the Democratic Party presidential nominee at this past week's Democratic National Convention. Now, the Democratic Party is so out of touch with their voter base. The majority of Democrats see Israel's genocide in Gaza as the #1 issue, and they don't want the US to continue to support Israel with weapons. And yet, her campaign said her #1 issue is supporting IVF and abortion. Don't you dare talk to us about women's rights as you hand Israel every single bomb to destroy every women's health clinic and every IVF clinic. 181 women give birth in Gaza every single day without any painkillers. And as Malcolm X once famously told us, the Democrats are more dangerous than the Republicans because they are the wolves in sheep's clothing. But let me tell you, there is nothing democratic about a political party that has provided every single weapon to an apartheid state to bomb schools and hospitals and residential homes in Gaza. There is nothing democratic about a political party that has cracked down on our right to protest a horrific human tragedy that is paid for by our taxpayer money. There is nothing democratic about weaponizing anti-Semitism to silence and our opposition to killing children with our tax money. There is nothing democratic by a political party that deems protesters blocking roads as troublemakers and uncivilized, while our weapon manufacturers at Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Raytheon see their stock prices go up every time a child is killed in Gaza. There is nothing democratic about a political party that has been bought and owned by a Zionist lobby that are not even registered as foreign agents. The tentacles of the overarching Israel lobby from the likes of AIPAC and the Anti-Defamation League and more influence much of American political policy and even the media. It's no wonder why we in the United States don't even have a mainstream media anymore. We have an extremist corporate media beating the drums of war. Western media leave out the context that Israel is occupying Palestinian land and fail to mention the crimes against humanity Israel is committing every single day according to the Geneva Convention. It's because our legacy media outlets like the New York Times Jerusalem Bureau is built on a Palestinian house in Al-Quds, Jerusalem, which belongs to a noted Palestinian writer, Ghada Karimi, who is a survivor of the Nakba. The New York Times also cooperates with Israeli officials by receiving and obeying gag orders by the Israeli government. The New York Times Israel bureau chiefs, Ethan Bronner, Isabel Kirshner, and David Brooks have had all of their adult children serve in the Israeli military while they were actively covering Palestine and Israel. The so-called paper of record never made this public to its readers, raising serious questions of bias and a conflict of interest. And despite publishing, spreading, and then retracting its atrocity propaganda about October 7th mass rapes, the New York Times just snagged a Pulitzer Prize for its Gaza coverage. The real unsung heroes are the over 100 Palestinian journalists that Israel killed and targeted with bombs in Gaza. They were assassinated. Over the past 9 months, we've witnessed many, many dark moments in the history of mankind. Over the last 9 months, we've witnessed the worst of what human beings are capable of. We've seen how the media can spread lies to justify a horrific war. We witnessed how our politicians can don their perfectly ironed suits looking at us straight in the eyes with a sparkle and a smile, telling us they don't have evidence Israel is targeting civilians. But in these dark moments of this horrific tragedy, a light has obviously shined through. And it is the collective humanity of us all, one by one, who organized, spoke out, boycotted, disrupted, educated, shut it down, and even self-emulated. The tides are certainly turning. In these dark moments, the ripple effects of change have created a global tide of revolution. This is the global awakening, and the Intifada has now been globalized. Yeah. We have risen above the media manipulation and propaganda machine that for far too long manufactured consent for apartheid under the guise of shared values, democracy, and human rights. But the world now knows that those shared values are colonialism, occupation, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and grave human rights abuses. We can't rely on our leaders to save us and stop this war. The power is in our hands, and we will continue to disrupt the war machine until the entire system of endless wars turns into endless peace. But our story doesn't end here. For every bomb dropped, every child left to survive but orphaned, limbs lost, every person pulled from under the rubble but horrified. For every person left to survive, they survived to tell our story. I was once that little girl who sat on her rooftop in Shafat al-Quds, who watched in horror Israeli jets drop bombs on homes in Ramallah. I was once, too, that little girl who sat in her classroom only to look around to find my classmates missing each day because they were blocked from crossing a checkpoint to get to school. I was once, too, that little girl who was too afraid to look outside her window as Israeli soldiers pointed their rifles toward us during a militarized curfew. I, too, was once that little girl who had her water cut off, who had to hide in her barricaded home so that Israeli settlers wouldn't come inside and attack our family. By 13 years old, I had already witnessed human rights abuses by a state that had convinced the world that it was a civilized democracy. $10.3 million per day of our tax money as Americans goes to Israel every single day. It's no wonder that after 9/11, after the terrorist attacks of 9/11, CNN and the majority of mainstream corporate media outlets planted a video. They planted a video of Palestinians handing out candy, celebrating Eid from the previous year, and reported that this video was of Palestinians celebrating 9/11. If you go on Stand With Us's website right now and on their social media pages, they still have this video up and they present it and report it as Palestinians celebrating 9/11. But it was a planted story from the year prior of Palestinians handing out candy, celebrating Eid. And of course, this is just one example of how the media lies and plants propaganda. And CNN had to retract in very fine print on their website. It was at 13 years old that I learned how propaganda works. And I realized that it was the media manufacturing consent for every single war that unfolded since I was 13, from the wars in Iraq, the wars in Afghanistan, the war in Libya, the expansion of AFRICOM across Africa, and the US's drone wars. And this realization at a very young age became the fire that lit under my feet to expose how media works as an arm of the weapons industry to promote endless wars for profits. Despite the pain and trauma of living under apartheid, I found courage and catharsis in my story and in every story that we share as Palestinians. I am a survivor of Israeli occupation, now leading an independent media outlet in the belly of the beast. MintPress News tells the story of not only Palestinians who are targeted by a US-sponsored genocide, but the story of all people living under the boot of US imperialism. We expose the war profiteers by naming the names. We are propping their propaganda information bubbles to help end manufactured consent for war. Israel thought it could bury us, but we turned out to be seeds.